I wanted to talk to you about this because obviously this is part of my story, and it's a big part of my epistemology and the way that I view truth in general, how I come to understand the world and what is reality is the way it was molded in the beginning, and you're a big part of that, and you have a big part of the story that I don't know. So I wanted to talk to you about it. And that is our history with the Jehovah's Witness organization, which you joined and I was born into. And then we both kind of subsequently left at the same time, um, with which coincided with the divorce of you and my mother. And I went on to become some kind of Baptist. I don't know what happened to you after that. Um, well, my first question to you is, currently, are you a believer in Jesus Christ?
Yes.
So would you call yourself a Christian then? A non-denominational Christian?
I would do that for the understanding of people asking me the question.
Okay. And anybody who watches this channel in any kind of regularity would know that I'm an atheist. And you know that as well. Um, my next
As
question,
best as I can know it.
right?
I'm not really convinced 100%, but
Yeah, that's
okay.
something that a lot of Christians say to a lot of atheists.
Really?
Yeah. Um, but that's okay. We won't get bogged in on that
No,
for
that's
now.
another.
So, how closely would you say? Oh no, let's phrase it a different way. Would you say that your current theological model is vastly different from what it was as a Jehovah's Witness?
Well, I'd say I would have to. The simple answer would be no. It's not significantly different, but then it was a model, and now it's not so much of a model.
What do you mean?
Well, as soon as you subscribe, in effect, to some orthodoxy, then you have a model that's pretty well shared with the bulk of everybody else. At least it was for us. And I was also a Catholic early in life, and my experience with that is that Catholics can have quite a wider range of that model.
So,
Okay, so at the time as a JW, I had a model, and it was pretty much orthodox.
you were an Orthodox Jehovah's Witness,
Right.
right?
And now I can't say they're substantially different, but it's not my intention necessarily to conform it to that model.
I see.
I
I
can I
think I
can
see.
develop I can develop new perspectives on things, and have probably.
Okay. It would be interesting to get you in a room with an Orthodox Jehovah's Witness and try to get you guys to hash it out and see how much it has actually drifted, if at all. But that's another topic for another day, and I'll work on that.
Right,
I
right.
will
And
work on
and
that.
if I can clarify, uh, my differences, probably, I would say the differences between me and of course this is my term I'm using, orthodox. It's not one that Jehovah's Witnesses use,
No.
but just for our common understanding, um, the uh, the differences between me and the Orthodox Jehovah's Witness would probably be more centered around the organization and its place in the world, as opposed to the theological aspects of it. Uh,
Okay.
just to clarify, and I don't want to get off too far ahead of you, but here, um, I come to feel that the Jehovah's Witnesses are very scriptural, uh, accurate, scripturally accurate. Okay, they deal with everything that's in there, and And of course, it's all open to dispute for other people, but it's everything that's offered is based on on biblical stuff.
Okay.
So it's easy to see where it comes from. Whether you agree or not is, of course, another issue. But um, probably the other part of it, the functional aspect of it, is where I would have a divergence, and you'll probably get into some of that.
Okay. So let's zoom out a little bit. Let's go back to the beginning ish. Um, like you said, you went to Catholic schools. You were raised a Catholic, right?
Yes,
Is there any more specifics on that, like Roman Catholics?
Roman,
Some
Roman.
okay. Um, how old
Yes,
were you when you left or lost that?
approximately 14 years old.
Um, how well versed do you think you were at that time in that tradition?
In the Roman Catholic
Yes.
tradition. Well, when you're raised in the Catholic, you go to Catholic school from kindergarten through 8th grade. You get the same. Um, what's the word that's not indoctrination? Okay.
Don't ask me.
Okay.
You know what I'm
So
thinking.
I think we understand each other. It's indoctrination if it turns out to be not true.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
All right. I would
I got
say.
you. Okay.
Otherwise, you're getting an education.
Right. Okay.
So my education was a Catholic, and it's a very formulaic education, and it's everybody in the group shares it. So there's a strong adherence, congruence between everybody's until you get older, and then you start saying things like, "What about bigger issues?" I won't name them. Um, so I would have to say your question was like how well versed or something of that nature.
Yeah.
I'd say fairly well versed for anybody who hasn't gone into a seminary level, something like that.
At around that time, do you remember going to any um, pastors, preachers, whatever you call them, anybody with an apologetics type background or something of that nature, and putting forth an effort to stay in that tradition?
For me to put it in an effort to stay,
Yeah.
well, I think I can just tell you that around the time I was 14, give or take, we had confraternity classes, which are kind of like night school for Catholics. Boys had theirs, girls had theirs, and they deal with subjects that aren't out of the books. Okay,
Okay.
uh, like for instance, specifically sexuality, reproductive, rather informative, slightly on the clinical side, and uh, and other theological things that I can't really remember. That one that one stays in my mind. But at the time, I'm in the confraternity thing. I start getting developing serious questions on some big theological issues, and it was the instructor for the confraternity I was able to question some stuff. I can't say he's an apologist or what if that's the word you used. Um, Not necessarily a Catholic scholar,
Hmm.
but he was in charge, so he was an authority figure in that regard.
But it was
Uh,
somebody who you would expect to have answers, pretty much.
well, yeah, you just work with what you're offered,
Right.
and I knew the priest, the pastor, as they call the head priest in the church, is a pastor, but we never really had any conversations of significance.
Okay.
So I had the one source, and I went to that person. Did not get satisfied.
And so, did you jump straight from that into Jehovah's Witnesses, or was there a
No.
period um, of non-religiousness, or maybe atheism, or something like that?
Yeah. Well, the at that point, the rejection of Catholic belief was fading fast, crumbling, and then and still a certain amount of open mindedness, perhaps. I was at the time I'm 18. I have a girlfriend who I married, and she was a Baptist. So before we got married, and when we were still younger, I would go with her to her Baptist church, Southern Baptist denomination. Not that we were in the South, but and it was in the days when hellfire was still a popular topic, popular enough, and it was one of my big concerns. So uh, it did take too long before I had to reject the concepts that the Baptists were offering, because that was just too key for me.
What was that word? I'm sorry, I didn't make it out. Back what? You reject the concepts of backstrapping?
Nah, I don't know. I don't know what I said. That's
Yeah. Oh.
Let's move on, because what something that you're not understanding here.
There was a word that you said that I just didn't make out, I think. Sound like backdropping or something. Huh. Okay.
I don't think so. Not
It
that.
was about hell. You had a problem with the concept of hell. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. That was that to me. It's a very fundamental question, aspect to be dealt with when one is regarding the existence of God or the nature of God. Either way.
And
So
your understanding as a Catholic was not the same as your understanding at 18, right?
my understanding.
Yeah. The understanding that you had as a Catholic when you were 14, or before 14, I should say, and then contrast that with the understanding that you are at this point in the story when you're 18 and you're with your first wife. Um, how is that different?
Not much. I mean, both churches, as it seems in most churches, which I later learned is not only pretty much across the board with the Orthodox religions, but also ancient and pagan. And I mean, my later studies just shows me that hellfire or a similar concept is just weaves its way through most all the religions. Jehovah's Witnesses is an exception, and I'm sure there are a few others, but so that's one thing that will come up later, perhaps in our conversation. But the Catholics' understanding, obviously, with Dante's Inferno and things of this nature, and other illustrations, a lot of Catholic-based art, they definitely take it to a higher detail and stuff like that. But the same basic concepts existed with the Baptists and everybody else I came across. And so my understanding, which was really a rejection of that, was the same for the Catholics and the Baptists. Their understanding between the two is way too similar for me to draw a serious distinction between them.
Okay, and then basically what we're talking about is if you fail to achieve salvation, you will be damned for eternity, and you will burn for eternity in hell.
Yeah, that's the concept as I understood them teaching it.
Okay.
Now that I have also heard it modified by some people, probably who also may find this concept a bit objectionable, is that the hell would actually just be separation from God.
Right, I've heard that many times as well.
Okay. And that actually some may have some plausibility to it, I think.
Okay. So here you are at 18 years old. You've rejected this hell concept of eternal torment,
Right.
that is purposefully inflicted upon you by the creator.
Exactly.
So kind of walk me through the next stage in the development and kind of take me to the right up to the point where you are introduced for the first time to the Jehovah's Witnesses. In a quick
Okay,
summary.
so after the short stint with the Baptists, I still married my wife, and religion wasn't an issue between us. Uh, but I moved into atheism because, well, I think I gave too much credit to the scholars and the historians and the history of the world. Just, in other words, to just outright reject the hellfire doctrine and rather reject God because theoretically the hellfire doctrine is true. I mean, there's a whole lot of witnesses against me on this issue. Okay, so okay, if I'm going to accept the consensus that there is hellfire, that God does torture people forever for whatever reasons, uh, then I don't need God. I can't even acknowledge his existence. I know the logic here is a little bit weak,
May I pause you for a
but
second?
sure.
Does that rise to the level of true disbelief in his existence, or is it merely an intellectual rejection of the concept, and then his existence becomes just an entailment of that rejection of the concept? Does that make sense?
Well, I think I know what your question is. Um, Intellectually, it just didn't work out. It wasn't logical. You can only be taught that God is love to some degree for so long, and then try to reconcile it with eternal torment, and then your brain starts blowing up.
Mm-hmm.
The two they can't coexist in my mind together. My solution was God's a creep,
Mm-hmm.
and I just don't want to have anything to do with him. And then logically, as time goes on, you kind of go like, this can't be right either. God can't be that creepy. Okay. So then my rationale is, okay, then there's no God. The whole hellfire thing is just a lie made up to control people or whatever the heck you want to define that. And so there really is no God at all. It's This is going to be something that I think you've dealt with. It's hard to separate yourself from all the BS that you've been exposed to.
Yeah, certainly.
You still want it to all equate logically in your head, and it's almost impossible to do that. All these things, there's just too much conflict and contradiction. So the method is chosen, and that is, okay, become an atheist, which I did, and rather a rabid one, if you will.
So you became a rabid atheist, you'd say.
Oh yeah, I became a preacher, if you will.
Oh.
Well, now see, because I feel like I'd been lied to. Of course, everybody else has, but I'm a bit of a warrior on this thing. I take it personally, and it was my interest to help anybody else who wanted to get out of that kind of craziness. Not that I had the right path to lead them to, but anyway. So yeah, I did that. I got involved, much as yourself, let's say.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So,
You. It's a lot of parallels here, dude. Go ahead.
so, well, it's just so many different avenues to take it. I don't know how far I want to take it down that hole. As I do kind of want to keep this centered around the Jehovah's Witnesses for the purposes of this conversation.
Mhm.
Um, but let's just trail it down just a little bit. Um, so I just don't know.
Well, you were going for the history there a little bit. You want me to get back on that track?
I kind of just want to get a feel for like how 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 much so did you disbelieve? Like, were you was it really just about what God is, or did you come to some like
No, okay.
it's really hard
Let me help.
to articulate
Let me
this.
help you here. I actually formulated the equation for myself, if you will,
Yeah.
if I could use those terms. Because now, if you say there's no God, then you have to explain the existence of things.
Do
And
you? You really think that you have
well,
to?
I felt an obligation. Yeah, I think I mean, when the main offered answer is things are created by God, well, and I've already rejected God because you painted him with this uh, real sadistic side. So I can't accept that. Your God cannot exist. Stuff does exist, and you've got him tied to the Creator. Remember, I'm starting. All my thinking is starting from this indoctrination that I got all these years.
Hmm.
So you can't just leap from that to a correct answer. You can't be done. You have to shed and you have to rework your logic and the things going on in your brain. So it's a bit of a step-by-step process. They're big chunk steps, but you got to go through it. And so I went through it. And so what's the nature? How does the universe get here? Well, my simple formula is the universe was never created. It has always existed, and this works really well for me because if God always existed, then we have established the possibility of the concept that there could be something that's eternal. Well, if God can be eternal, why can't the universe be eternal? So this works rather neatly for me at the time, right?
Hmm.
So there is no creation and there is no destruction. There will just be everything going on eternally. So I no longer need God. I actually started with I used the evolutionary concept, the Big Bang concept. I'm to me they're both conflated. They're scientific explanations of things that these guys really don't know about, and so the Big Bang concept was strong with me. But then that's creation, and so I threw that away finally. And so it's no God, no creation, and if you die, you're just total annihilated. You just pass out of existence. So that works rather neatly.
And now, looking back on that, do you not see the? Do you still see that validity in that logic, or do you reject it?
Well, I definitely agree with the validity of the logic. I just don't know that it's true.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. That's fair enough. Um, did you ever consider that possibly? Did you ever think that you could be content with just simply saying, "I don't know"?
No, it's not in my nature.
Not in your nature, huh? Interesting. There's this one guy does this thing called street epistemology. He has this jar of gumballs. I don't know if I've ever told you about this before, but we're in a show, so I guess it's worth it for the audience. He asks people on the street. He says, "If I tell you that this jar of gumballs has an even number of gumballs in it, and are you justified in saying, yeah, I believe you, just on my assertion? I haven't counted them, etc." Right? And they will sometimes understandably say no, I'm not justified in that. I don't know how many gumballs are in there. You don't know how many. So how could I say whether or not it's even or odd? But sometimes they will actually indulge in actually just saying, yeah, I believe it. And it's kind of like a dissonant type of thinking because there's no way of knowing whether or not it's even or odd, because the correct answer is, I don't know how many are in there. I can't say. I have to stay in a neutral position up until somebody counts the gumballs. It's either or. So what do you think of that? You see the analogy there?
Well, yeah, it's, yeah. But what do I say about the person who says, "Okay, I believe you," because he's obviously not really getting stake in this. It's not if he gets it right, he gets all the gumballs, or he avoids hellfire. He just doesn't care. I don't care either, but I'm not gonna give him the satisfaction of saying, oh yeah, I just believe you because you say it, because I'm too skeptical. If this is important, if I'm going to say to the guy on the street, if it's that important, uh, we'll count them. I'll count them with you, and then at this point, I will believe you until somebody eats a gumball and changes it to an odd number. I mean, it has no serious consequence, so it's a fun experiment. But no, I can't. I don't have the nature where I can just say I believe you because you say it. Neither do I care enough to count the gumballs.
Interesting.
And that's really where what I didn't care if I was going to be annihilated at the end of my life, because God is not there. As long as I don't get tortured in hellfire, I don't really care what the next thing is.
Okay.
So I'm similar for my gumballs. I don't care.
Fair enough. So you're in this state of mind for your early 20s,
Yeah.
and then at some point you meet some Jehovah's Witness. Can you tell me about that? Who is this
Well,
person?
the it goes like this. I was remarried, right? And my second wife, who also was raised Catholic, and she was a fan of Mary, which
Mary.
many Mary, the mother of Jesus,
Okay.
who is a very popular person in with people in the Catholic faith. More so in other countries, perhaps. But anyway, that was her thing, and a woman named Amber and somebody else had come to our door when she was home, and you know did their little opening lines, see if there's a conversation, and the subject of the Bible is brought up, of course, and and Karen had an interest in knowing more from the Bible about Mary, because she, again, is raised in Catholic schools. You get the catechism. You go through all those years in Catholic school, you don't get the Bible at all. There will be a couple of maybe a verse or two, or or a small section read during the mass.
Hmm.
That's it. It's read. There's no interpretation, and there's no study of it. So Catholics can generally, if they're interested, be hungry for Bible information. And she was wanting more on Mary. So Amber agreed with her to sit down, at some point, and she would show her the stuff that's in the Bible about Mary. Mary, and she wants to know about the Assumption and the miraculous conception, Immaculate Conception, and other things. And so she invites her in, and they have regular weekly Bible studies on the subject. And then, of course, I was invited to sit in, but I didn't want to do that because there ain't no God. But Amber was really nice first, and anybody she brought, sometimes I would run into them. I'd come into the house, and they'd be having their Bible study. In fact, one of the people was Yvonne, who you probably know very well.
Right.
Right. Should we say this for the audience?
Yeah.
It's your mother. Okay. Your mother was one of them. Right. And so, very nice people. These people were wonderful. Well dressed, well mannered, spoke well, knowledgeable, a lot of things. And
So my mom was one of the Jehovah's Witnesses that was coming into the Bible studies. She was already in it.
Yeah, she was already. She was sitting on my couch when I come home
Oh
with
Jesus.
my atheist beliefs and other things that were not pertinent to this
Yeah.
topic. And unlike myself, who can be kind of obnoxious and confrontational, they weren't those things. Okay, obviously we had different differences of opinion, disagreements, and stuff like that. They were not objectionable. So Karen's carrying on with this stuff, and she's getting very interested in it. She is learning that many of the things she believed about Mary are not supported in the Bible, and seems to want to know more. But there could also be a strong social factor. I don't really want to get into too much of the motivations of other people,
Hmm.
but so regardless, she carried on with this thing and got involved in it, and of course I was invited and I rejected, and then it was suggested that maybe Amber's husband Jerry might come over and we could talk. Didn't have to be a Bible study or anything like that. But you see, I like, as you would understand easily, conversations, arguments. I mean, this is the fun of life.
Right.
So yeah, so let's Jerry come over here and we'll talk. I have some fun, and we had some very nice conversations for a while. And they generally, wherever they started, I can't tell you, I don't remember, but they would always seem to work themselves back to this basic question of the existence of God. Doesn't seem to matter what it is, it all seems to work back to that. And so I had my arguments against the existence of God, and he was rather skillful in using his logic. He was a very logical minded guy, and he kept backing me into corners I couldn't get out of logically. So I cut it off. I was like, forget this. I
I
can't
wonder,
change his mind.
could you maybe? This is a hard question to ask on the spot, so it's fine if you just want to skip it, or maybe when we do our part two or whatever, we could revisit this. Maybe you could just think about it for until then. But is there maybe one argument or one exchange of argument and counter argument that stands out as like maybe your best argument against God versus his rebuttal to it? Maybe.
No, it's no. First off, it's too far back in the past to
Yeah.
remember. All I have is the flavor in my memory,
Okay,
and the
that's fine.
flavor is I kept getting. I'm a very logical person. I think you'll agree, and I came to my beliefs logically, not by indoctrination, and uh, and I just kept getting stuck in that corner.
Hmm.
So I took my ball and went home, cut it off. But there was another aspect, and I don't want to get off too much on a tangent here, but just to kind of, there was another motivation. I was been, as you see today, I'm still quite politically motivated. I have very strong interest in government and things of that nature, and and the thing I'm getting from Jerry as well is this the kingdom of God concept, which we've all heard the term, and many people probably think of heaven. That's not their concept of all at all of the kingdom of God. It's a a new it's an earthly government by Jesus. Okay, so this has a very appealing aspect to it. There's a government aspect. So whereas I'm losing on the logic existence of God thing, I'm getting intrigued by this possibility of a non-man-made government. I mean, it's probably something I thought of on my own. What we really need, because I just spent a lot of time with government in my mind, even arguing with my dad in my early days about government and getting involved in communist thinking and all kinds of things like that. The perfect government. He challenged me one time. We were sitting at the table. He says, well, if you can come up with a better government than we have here in this country, then I'll hear about it. So I spent a lot of time trying to do that, trying to figure out what were the things necessary to get rid of, to keep, to add in for the perfect government. And one of them was, seemed like no matter what you do, human beings are going to be involved, and they just keep getting corrupted. So,
Hmm.
so the perfect government has to be no human beings. So now Jerry's got something very intriguing for
He's got
government.
a government ruled by an all-powerful, all-knowing, perfect, and perfectly good dictator.
Non-human. You can if you focus on dictator, that's your business. I focused on non-human,
So I mean,
which is to me is very important. So anyway, so now I'm lured to continue. I go back to these sessions with Jerry, and now I'm looking in a different direction here. I'm not so much interested in getting away from the God part. Uh, like the gumball question, I can live without that. I'm going to live either way, right?
hmm.
So I could go on thinking I'll be annihilated when I die or whatever, and it won't matter. In the meantime, I can learn more about this kingdom and see if that's a government I could work with. So now I'm headed down that track, and that's what drew me into the organization.